You are listening to the Victims and Villains podcast, a podcast extension of the nonprofit that creates content to educate and engage individuals like yourselves on mental health awareness and suicide prevention through pop culture. My name's Captain Nostalgia, and on this episode, we are diving back into a world that we haven't dived into, that's the word I'm looking for, in a long time. It's been several years since we've done anything like this episode. Here to tell his story for all you true crime people out there. This is a fascinating tale that we were able to, so blessed to get. He's an actor, he's a model, he's a nurse. His resume is just long. Please help me in welcoming Mr. Mark Henderson.
You left off a police officer and all around naughty Santa in Canada. Thank you so much for having me on.
Absolutely. I didn't want to jump too much into your story because I don't know. I try to give people a hook to listen, so that way there's twists and turns as the story goes.
Sure. Let me tell you a quick story.
A
story about a guy who was at the bottom of his rope. Everything was not going his way. Nothing was going his way. He'd given up. He had just given up and thought, I'm not doing this very well. Time to throw himself in front of a vehicle. As he sat at the roadside on a bench, he said to himself, the next big vehicle that comes down that hill, he's going to jump in front of it. And he stood up as a big vehicle came towards him, and he pulsating back and forth, ready to do it. And, the last second, he couldn't do it. And then he sat down, defeated, even more broken. He couldn't even do this right. And the sun was beating down on him. Looked down the street, and there was a Mack truck careening towards him. And he thought, perfect, absolutely perfect. This is going to do it. He looked across the road just as he stood up to jump in front of this Mack truck, and a woman waiting for a bus that was just pulling up made eye contact with him, smiled and waved. To such an extent, distracted him, the Mack truck went by too. Now, a lot of miracles happened in that man's life between that moment and this. And the most recent one is that you asked him to be a guest on your show.
Wow.
That's who's in this chair.
A lot of what we're going to be talking about over the next hour is going to be heavy.
Yep.
And so I guess let's start off with obviously this, just to kind of give a brief synopsis.
Go for
it. Over what the next hour is going to entail. Can you kind of tell us about your experience with Bruce McArthur and this serial killer, and kind of this experience that you had on Halloween 2001? Sorry.
Sure. Well, there is a serial killer that was recently convicted and imprisoned in Canada who ripped through the gay community. I mean, we are still devastated from that. It began, by my accounts, in 2001. If any of your listeners Google the killer Bruce McArthur or the serial killer in Toronto, they'll see that the police have very conveniently moved the timeline from 2010 to 2017. They want me to go away and disappear, but I really think my story is the most important one for one reason only, and that's that I'm here to tell my side. And I am not a popular guy with the police in Toronto. I'm not a popular guy with a lot of people. When the other victims of this crime come up, they're somehow let go. They don't have a problem with image or likability, whereas I encounter that quite a lot. So on Halloween 2001, broad daylight at noon, I was walking down the street and was in a completely unprovoked attack by a serial killer. He was wielding a pipe. And do you want me to sort of walk you through the actual attack?
Yeah, if you don't mind.
Sure. So my father was a very smart man, and he told me to write my account of this immediately as soon as I could. And I wrote several times, and I had to send emails to people. So there's actually a few versions of my truth. And I'll just say up front, I remembered when I first started telling this story in 2018, uh, that he got out of a white truck. And then I referred to my notes, and it said he stepped out of a maroon van. Now, I've told the story so many times, replacing the white truck with the maroon van, that I now remember a maroon van that I hitherto thought was a white truck. So, memory for me is very fluid. I never had experienced this before. I think somebody can remember something or they can't. I never thought I could amend memories. So I'm telling you the truth as I swear to God it is true. There are some times in my story, you could say, when was the last time you saw the killer? I saw him standing on underneath the A&W sign on Yonge Street here in Toronto a couple of years ago. And we both know I didn't. He was in jail. But I would probably pass a lie detector test thinking that that was the truth. And, it was frightening for me to see that. So I'm going to give you the account quickly. I came home noon. I was unlocking my bike, which I wrote in the account. I don't remember that part. I just remember seeing him. I went. There are two doors to the building, a front and a back door. The back door is a bit more discreet, and I tended to use that a bit more. And I just because it's a main street out front, and I didn't want people to see me coming and going. And I was a fairly prominent actor at the time, and a model. Like I was the big guy in a lot of shows. So I sometimes, for security reasons, went through the back door. This serial killer, who was known to me, but he was sort of an irritating person in my life, ran to catch up to me, and he was wearing, a lambskin coat and jeans. So I saw him head to toe, which tells me right there, this is a strange phenomenon that he is wielding a pipe. I can't tell you now where it was. Was it up his sleeve or down one of the legs of his pants? And it wasn't a true pipe. It was the sheath that one would put over a barbell, like at a home gym, sort of that aluminum corrugated uh, pipe. So as I was unlocking the door to my apartment, which was just inside the back door, I'd slipped in on the main floor. And it was Halloween day, which is a busy day for me because I founded the Toronto Halloween party. And so it's lots of people coming and going, pretty much a doors open kind of thing for me. I assumed he was going through the building. I didn't really pay him much attention when all of a sudden something happened, and I didn't know what had happened. I thought maybe a piece of the ceiling had fallen on us, or I think I felt more that he tripped and slammed into me. And I have defense wounds on my left hand and a fractured left forearm at that point, because that must have been defense wounds where I put my hand up. And then when I turned around, it was more out of concern for him because I didn't know what had happened. I saw him hoisting the pipe over his head with a demonic look in his face, like a reptile. Like his eyes were just black, and in my mind they are. And I realized that he and I, in that moment, were a mile apart. He was there to kill me, and I was just there opening my apartment door, and I was baffled and confused. I also had my vision was affected. I couldn't hear anything. And I know at some point somehow I was able to put both feet on his chest or abdomen and shove him back. That bought me some time, and I was, of course, yelling and screaming, but there was no one around. And I thought, well, and I knew I had a fractured skull. I thought, I don't know how long I have. So I went deeper into the apartment to the phone. Before I got to the phone, I stopped and picked up a tall silver candlestick that I had, and we kind of squared off a bit. He'd stepped into the apartment with me, which wasn't what I wanted. And we stood there for a moment, and I just remember very clearly thinking, if this is my last moment in life, I do not want to spend my last moments on earth hitting another person with this object that looked like it would hurt him. I just couldn't do it. And I thought I'd best go for the phone. So I went for the phone, and that move to put that down and go to the phone, he was a clip or two behind me. Like I was taking him by surprise, and that bought me time. So I quickly blurted out my name and my address into the phone, knowing they already had my phone number. And she said, "Is he there?" And I said, "Yes." And she said, "Describe him." So I just started reading his outfit. At which point, oh, he was also looking for the end of the cord, but it was had just been the '90s, a couple of years before, when we had, the Jerry Seinfeld 30-foot long phone cords. So he couldn't find the end of it. And I'm not sure if he ever did. I just read the EMS showed up very quickly. He was gone. He went and turned himself in to the police and said that he'd had a fight with Mark Henderson and they were probably looking for him. And so right away, he's just booked, charged, and released. And I'm in an odyssey all of my own, taken to an ambulance. I can't tell you how long I was there. The timing's really gone. I was terrified to come out of the hospital. There were press outside the hospital. We had to sneak me out. A journalist was doing a story on me about some problems. I knew someone was escalating and I was calling the police and they weren't taking me seriously. So a journalist named Valerie Gibson was going to do a story on me. And I remember saying to my mom in the hospital when I could talk, tell Valerie not to run the story. He'll kill her. And everyone thought I was being dramatic. They thought, oh, gee, this guy's really, really out there. So I went and convalesced at my sister's, and that's the story of the attack. That's in a nutshell.
Can you talk about your relationship to Bruce? Was there any like previous like conversations or like any like experiences? Was it like a friendship gone sour? Can you kind of talk about like how you like the two of you guys even knew each other?
Yeah. I I can't remember the beginnings, but uh, all I can say was that he sort of seemed to grow in in visual field for me. And I would see him on the other side of the street and think, oh crap, there's that guy. And he would cross the street to put himself in my trajectory. Whenever I would see him, I would think to myself, ugh, you know, here's that guy I have to say hello to. It got so much that I had reached out to the police. I'd been getting about 30 or 40 hang up calls a day for the summer in 2001. And, and I wanted the police to track the calls. And they were really crusty with me. Like, oh, who do you think you are? Like you must be something. And you know how much work it is? We have to go before a judge and we have to get a warrant to go to Bell and search your records for this. Like whoever it is will stop. And I was just dismissed and denied. And every time I talked to an officer, because I had a nursing background, I know that nursing notes were very admissible in court. I just documented everything out of instinct. I have names of officers, I have badge numbers, I have file numbers from the summer of 2001, in which I was completely ignored. So I just would always see him. If I was performing, he would be there uh, at the bar or in the audience. Um, that might not have been personal. That might have been coincidence. But looking back, I have a biased memory, and I'm accused all the time of exaggerating, lying, starring myself in this drama, and just making it all about me. But I got to tell you, what I'm telling you happened. It really happened. So I'm not. There's the police told me at one point, we think you're both liars. As I stood there with a fractured skull, a broken arm, and like there was no lying. So he just was that person, and I would suspect, based on the number of people who come out, you once you throw this story out there, you might hear from a lot of people that say that, they had experiences with him as well. I think he covered a lot of ground. And a lot of people want into stories like this, which is really weird. Being in a story like this, I want out. I want you and I to be talking about old Hollywood or all the money I won at the lotto last night. I don't want this to be the cards I've been dealt. And other people want this like you wouldn't believe.
Yeah,
Yeah, sorry, go.
it's this weird, strange fascination. The culture has kind of just become consumed with true crime, and whether it's documentaries, podcasts, like they just seem to gravitate towards the stories, and I don't understand it, but again, like I understand where you're coming from when you're talking about people wanting to have your story. If you or someone you know is listening to this podcast right now and you're struggling with suicide, addiction, self-harm, or depression, we encourage you guys to please reach out. This is the heartbeat of why we do what we do. Suicide is currently the 10th leading cause of death in the United States, and as of this recording, there are 132 suicides that take place each and every day on American soil. And when you scale back internationally, there are 800,000 successful suicides. That is one death roughly every 40 seconds. So if you or someone you know is struggling, you guys can go to victimsandvillains.net/hope. That resource is going to be right in the description wherever you guys are currently listening or streaming this. There you'll find resources that include the National Suicide Lifeline, which is 1-800-273-8255. You can also text HELP to 741-741. We also have a plethora of other resources, including churches, getting connected with counselors, LGBT resources like the Trevor Project, and also veteran hotline as well. Please, if you hear nothing else in the show, understand that you listening to this right now, have value and worth. We get it. Suicide, depression, mental health, these are hard topics, and the stigma around them doesn't make it any easier. But please consider the resources right in the descriptions below, wherever you guys are listening, because once again, you have value and you have worth. So please stay with us.
It's weird because I can show you 400 emails or texts I sent out from people after it broke in 18, begging them to meet me for coffee or to come over or let me go to their place, and all of them said no. And of that 400, any of the local people, whenever a camera came out on the street or a journalist, by golly, they were there. And to this day, none of those people are here. I even have two friends that were lifelong friends from high school. I have never heard from them since. Like everyone, it was just too much. I had to. The first thing I did once I got going and after his arrest was I got myself a therapist and learned how to let go and let the gods take people that I can't make control. I can't change people, places, and things. I get a little ticked off when I'm on TikTok, things like that, and people are presenting the killer with this happy music or these weird voices, and a lot of times they prefer my beard over his beard. So when they click on an image to add to their story, they use mine instead of the killer's. It's just a better photo. So I've shut down a lot of accounts. A lot of people just blocked me and carried on. The narrative that's in the Wikipedia really ticks me off because it's police driven, and they've completely cut me out. Because after the attack, I went on to become a police officer. We'll talk about that more in a bit. But they made mistakes for almost 2 decades, and they're trying to make it look like it was just 7 years. Well, it just wasn't. It really wasn't. And I know stuff about this case that no one has. To this day, I've never spoken with an officer. I had to give a statement on tape during his trial, but I've never had a police officer sit down and say, "Tell me what happened." I know stuff about this case. I know stuff about 2 other One's a disappearance here in Toronto. I'm sure that my friend Kevin did not kill himself, and that this killer got him. And I know of another unsolved crime for which this serial killer has a trophy, or had a trophy in his world, and I think he was responsible for her death. And you know, I'm still disregarded.
Well, I'm hoping this podcast will shed some light and kind of give some people either hope if they've gone through something similar, or kind of set the facts straight.
Yeah,
I don't want to necessarily
I
come
don't
do
think we'll
this.
I don't think we'll set the facts straight, but I can tell people what I've learned. I
Sure.
because I've learned some solid lessons. They say when you go through something like this, you find out who your friends are. That wasn't my experience. I found out who I wanted my friends to be. Very different list, and a surprising list. I have a cousin lives downtown, and he's cute as a button, and he has a day job, and he's a sex worker voluntarily and does triple X, and I really wanted his companionship, his company, his ear just once, and he couldn't do it, and I've never heard from him again. I I had to learn the law of the streets is when you go down alone. There were places here in town. One's called the 519. It's a community center. They have counseling and food and all kinds of things. My first experience with them in 2001, they sent me to what was called a gay bashing program. And it was a very depressing lady in a very depressing little room, and she didn't have much she could offer me. And I didn't, the whole thing bothered me because I'm like, well, what makes a gay bashing? Like, am I gay, or the stick is gay, or the guy bashing me is gay? Like, why is this? Why is that? What's in anybody's pants involved with my fractured skull? So I, I, and it's also, the 519 is also a place where media types park their vans and their cameras and do their live feeds from. If you were to come here, that's the first place you'd set up. So my big mistake, and the thing I try to say to my own community that may be listening to this when I promote it here, is that I should have gone to the 519 for the new arrest in 18, and I didn't. I was afraid they were tied in with the media, and they only told me after that they don't like the media, that they find that invades the privacy of people who need their services. So when I hear of anybody, and there's been a few since, uh, people that have been attacked and stuff, I reach out to them and say, I'll go with you. I know the places we need to hit. And the police are, you know, they're still awful. I was attacked in 2016, and the police didn't write a single note about it. I contacted a reporter. She did a story the next night on the news, and she asked for a comment from headquarters, and they said, we have nothing to comment on Mark Henderson. Like, they didn't even write anything down. The guy that assaulted me in 16, he lives in my building. He was, threatening me today when I, had an encounter with him. It's no better. We have a girl went missing in Toronto named Tess Ritchie, and her mother, she just sort of was out with some gay guys, and after a gay bar let out, she went off, said goodbye to her friends, went this way with a guy she just met. And her all the bells and whistles were lit up. The chief of police came out and said that she was known to be moonlighting as a sex worker and up to nefarious affairs, or some stupid comment like that blamed her. And 2 or 3 days after her gone missing, it was her birthday, and her mother drove down from Northern Ontario, parked her car at Church and Wellesley, the gay sort of ghetto, got out, walked, went to a staircase, looked down the staircase outside an apartment building, and said, there's my daughter's body. The police didn't do so much as a walk through our neighborhood. And that's just recent. That was like, I think 2017 or 18. Nothing's been learned.
Wow.
I went by the police headquarters. Today's Wednesday. I went by Monday, and two officers who are plainclothes because they work at headquarters. They wear business wear, shirts and ties. Came walking down the ramp staircase in front of headquarters. I watched them, and they jaywalked across the street. So I jaywalked across the street right after them. They did take note of me, but I'm white, so they're not going to say anything, and I'm doing the same thing they just did. So it was very interesting to me. I wonder what would have happened if I was someone they didn't like. And so they went into the building across the street with the coffee shop, and when they got in there, they took their badges out of their plastic pocket badge out of their pockets, clipped it on so it could be seen by the staff, and got free coffees. When they got the free coffees, they turned and walked away, unclipping their badge, put it back in their pocket, and jaywalked back into headquarters. I have a real problem with the ethical slide of that. Now, all the things that have been said about me, I feel like I can throw some pretty heavy stones at the cops on this, because if that coffee shop gets knocked over and the girl says, "We called you and you didn't come for 45 minutes," the cop will say, "Yeah, but we were busy. Sorry." And inherently, she's thinking, "But I give you free coffee. I expect a little bit better service." So as soon as the police start doing stuff like that, ethically, they are skidding on ice everywhere. I would love someday to be like the headline in the paper saying Mark Henderson is a guy that took the free coffee out of every cop's hands. Cops make $70 an hour in this city. The person handing it to them, free coffee, is making minimum wage. It's not right. It's just a bad optic.
It's not. And I want to jump back into your story real quick
Yeah, yeah.
because uh, one of the things that in doing research preparing for this episode that is really heartbreaking to know um is that any anything resulting around like x-rays or just like any hospital reports after your attack with Bruce had basically been like sealed for almost 2 decades.
No, that's not
And
accurate.
it's
What
not.
what no. What happened was um the all the records were public until he got rearrested in 2018, because nobody believed me. It's like it never happened. And so I was just supposed to go on as if it didn't happen. So when 2018 came along and they arrested him, they brought me into headquarters toot sweet. And the crazy thing is they called me up on the phone. They said, we're looking for Mark Alexander. And I said, well, you got the first name right, but you got the last name wrong. Said, oh, wait, look for Mark Henderson. I was Alexander's, the street I lived on. And then they asked me if I was Mark Stephen or Mark David. And they keep messing me up with a Mark David, Mark Stephen. They still probably have that wrong. They told me to shut up because one, I was alive. Two, I had notes. Three, I testify well. I'm able to put my point across clearly. And I think they wanted to keep me back and not have me contaminate the investigation or the media just by keeping me safe. So they had one sure way of putting this guy away because they knew they were vastly in the wrong at that time. And so every night on the news, they were saying Mark Henderson prostitute, Mark Henderson male sex trade worker, Mark Henderson this. I was a very successful model and actor. I'd been a registered nurse and a police officer. And the things that they were saying were the killer's narrative from the first trial. So I took all of the media to court and I put an injunction. In Canada, we can't publish photos from a court case. We can publish it if they're out on the street, but we actually have artists who sit in the courtroom and draw. So you'll have the killer testify today, and it'll be a sketch of the person they show on the news. It's very weird. You might not have that there. And
We
so
don't, but I know what you're talking about.
yeah. So I sealed the records in 2018. One, because I wanted people out of my hall. My hall was full of people. I was really running the risk of becoming the Sharon Tate in this story, you know? And people were putting death hag stickers on my door and then standing in front of it and doing a sideways peace sign, and it was part of some where you get enough locations where people have been murdered and you run up a score. And I don't know. It was, I just didn't want that to be what this became. I know they go to the murder house all the time. That street has traffic all the time of people that are there going to buzz by and look at it. But
It's
it's
crazy.
so
What?
the documents were only sealed in 18, and then I unsealed them when I decided to talk in 2021, I think.
But I mean, even like going through, even sources be wrong on our end, like
Yeah.
still like going through a period of gaslighting to the degree that you experienced. Can you kind of talk about how that affected your mental health and kind of your search for justice?
My mental health, like I like to keep it pretty loose anyways. Like in that time of 2001 when I was attacked, in 1 week I had to be an ape, I had to be a dead body on a morgue slab, and I had to be a female impersonator who was Marilyn Monroe. All like Monday, Wednesday, and Friday of that week. That was my job. And I was very good at transforming and showing up in whatever they needed. So I kept my psychiatric walls much looser than you probably keep yours. And I'm still that way. I still like to keep it kind of loose and let it all hang out. Um, so to I had to very early create a distance between what you say about me and what I say about me. And there were some dark years after the attack. I would say 3 or 4. Just, I was paranoid. I was forced to stay in the same apartment where the attack happened. I had no money to move. And of course, my career took a real hit. Like, word got round, and it got round fast, that I'd been attacked, and that, there was something was up. And it doesn't take much to scandalize a film and television crew, or, a brand, to drop you as a model. So I had some dark years. And then I saw a recruiting table for the police, and I thought, you know what? I can act like a cop, because I quite often acted like a cop in, you know, Kung Fu, and what was that one with yeah, Katrina, or she was the crime fighting spy, whatever. So I was always a cop. So I applied to the police force, and even that was just a mudslide. The When I went into for my first interview, the girl came to the officer came to interview me. She was shaking. And I said, "You all right?" And she said, "My boss just blew his head off with his gun upstairs last night, and I just found out." And they were like quietly trying to cover up this cop's suicide. So I said to her, "Do you want to go for a coffee?" And she's like, "Can we?" So we went for a coffee, and I I wasn't sure if she was really on the level with me, or whether this was part of the interview and that she was just going to lean on me and see what I did in a situation. So I stayed really professional and just, got her to talk, and she started sharing things, and found out I was in film and television, and she started saying sexual things to me about, did I know anyone who was into photography and video, that was sort of a thing for her. And I really was convinced that this officer was just making it up. So at the end, she said, "Look, we didn't talk about anything we're supposed to. Just sign this form, and I'll put whatever you need to get in." And I made a mistake when I did that. I did sign it, and I walked away, and I thought, that's the weirdest thing I've ever done. But I didn't think they'd ever take me. And she did. She did what she said, and I got in. And ethically, I was completely wrong to sign something like that, and allow someone to speak for me. I have no idea what's on my application. And Toronto police are always telling me, we don't have any documents on you, but that's not really true, because many times they've coughed up stuff where I find it they did have quite a lot of documents on me still. So the it I love telling the truth. And between now and the time you die, you're going to hear very few people say that to you. I'll probably be the only one. And one of the things about that is it keeps me on track. It also will light up people who will say, I'm going to research what Mark said. and they'll say, "Hey, you didn't tell the truth on this." So it keeps me honest. I'm not afraid of the truth. I don't like to lie. I get into trouble every time I lie, and I don't like it. I'd rather just tell the truth. And in this situation, I feel like I have, there's 8 men: Majib, Sharus, Salam, Dean, Scataranga, uh, Ab, Abdul Bazar, uh, Krishna Kumar, and Andrew Kim, and in some ways my friend Sean Cribben. They're hoping that I tell the truth, that somehow the light gets out. You know, the police really messed up on this, and they could unmess up on this so easily. They've I'm here. Why have they never spoken to me?
So let's kind of bring the audience up to why those particular men's names are significant.
Sure.
Uh, Essentially, the timeline, if I am understanding everything correctly,
You would know it more than
uh,
me. I don't even know where you went.
Bruce essentially like went to trial and basically, long story short, was not given any jail time whatsoever. Basically, nothing more than a slap on the
In,
wrist
in the
and
2001 attack of me, yeah, he
yep.
walked.
And then about 2010, if my timeline remembers correctly, it's about no like fourth quarter of 2010, like November, December, men started disappearing, and ultimately, like about 2018 is when 2017, 2018, somewhere around that point would be right around the point where he actually kind of started feeling the heat essentially, and there was too much evidence piling up against him, and the men that you list were kind of the men that had disappeared, and I don't know if actually have ever been found in those 8 years.
Well, it's a lot of people like to say things. There's a writer named James DeBro, and he's very good. And he'll say often that the killer liked playing games with the police. I don't agree with that at all. I think he was absolutely terrified of the police. He just was a very good liar. But he didn't enjoy the fight or the dance with the cops at all, which is why he killed people and buried them and hid them. He did not want to dance with the police. But he began killing apparently in 2010. And we knew in the gay community that people were missing. When I became a police officer, I became a police officer in 2007. I didn't have bodies tied to him, but I had a whole lot of stuff tied to him that wasn't bodies, and they were not prepared to listen to me. When the bodies started coming, it was horrifying, and we all knew there was something going on, and they were um we all looked the same. I looked like they did back in those days because I could play the bad guy if I had a dark beard and goatee, right? So we all had very similar looks, and he just started killing people, and uh, it was mortifying. The community's still ajar from it. We know we're not safe. We're not safe from people who are predators, and we're not safe from the getting help from the police. And the men were all found in planters or various graves at a home that the killer was working as a landscaper. And DNA from each of those missing people, except for my friend Sean, who's alive, but he was had an entanglement with the killer just before he was arrested. I don't want to call it a date because I don't think that's what it was, and it's not my story to tell. But Sean's still around. But all the other 8 men were found by DNA in the location of where he was a landscaper. And he killed
Now,
them. He killed the men in his apartment, and he had a roommate.
wow.
Yeah,
This
like
this
I
story just constantly like gives me like I don't know how to respond to it kind of reactions.
yeah.
Uh, Now between like the timelines between like actually going through the trial with you and the kind of the second wave were there ever any other instances that happened after you, or were you kind of like just like a sole victim that just happened
I
to
don't,
kind of
I don't
encounter
see.
Bruce?
I have been called a liar so much. I've been called self-centered. He's starring himself in this. He's making it up. He's really giving himself a lead role in this. And I don't mean to do that, but I will go to my grave saying that he never let up. When he escaped the charges, he was given parameters at the end of the court hearing with me that I never knew. But he got rid of those immediately. He later got himself entirely pardoned from it, but he was able to reduce his sentence 3 months after. And he made sure I knew. I was on a ground floor apartment. I was terrified. I would do my laundry at 4 in the morning. In fact, I still do. I don't go out. I haven't been out all summer. I haven't been out. Well, when the story broke in 18, I really haven't gone out. I go out for groceries and I keep to myself quite a lot. In many ways, I feel like I'm in jail. I had a year of therapy, and the therapist was wonderful. And she gave me an extension. Like she let me go for free for a while too. It was Tamara Roberts was her name, and I'd love to see that therapist again. But what I was really doing with her was preparing myself to be the best witness I could be at the trial. I knew that Canada wouldn't necessarily understand me or my choices or my life, and the media would sensationalize it. But I knew that they would respect somebody who got on the stand and put a killer away. They would respect the honesty. And I didn't want to disappoint. I prepared for that very much. I actually never got my day in court. And, I'll tell you because, well, I don't care anymore. Like, there was a book came out about the murders in the village, and the author he changed my name to David, and just told the killer's narrative, but everyone else he told the truth about. I was so hurt by that. I had him over personally. I said to him, "But you lied." He said, "I thought it would help you." I was like, but I'm accused of being a liar, and I actually only ever told the truth, and I never really got to tell the truth to anybody that mattered. So I've had to eat it the whole way through. And then in the Christmas of 2019, somebody started hitting me hard on social media, and I'd been alone for the whole year of 18. The police said, "Do not talk to anybody," and absolutely nobody reached out to me except media, but none of my friends. The only person I had in my life was my sister. So over Christmas, after that time between Christmas and New Year's, somebody started hitting me on social media hard. And I just thought, oh, fuck it. Sure, let's come on over. Let's see if there's any chemistry. And which was not something I would do, but I just was there. I was just so down and out. And my mental health or self esteem was very negotiable. The person walked through the door, and to their credit, they were at least honest in person. And they immediately told me, started asking questions about the murder, and told me that he was a prison guard. And I said, "You're a prison with him?" So right away, that's a mistrial if if I didn't bail. So I got out of that situation as fast as I could. And he put in for a transfer, what do you call that, conflict of interest, so that
Sure.
I wouldn't be able to cause any problems with his job. When he was here, he saw my police awards, and I know what happened after that. I know he went back to the prison system and got word directly to the killer saying, "Don't face Henderson in court. He's going to destroy you." I know that. And people will say, "Mark, you are making this up. You're starring yourself in the crescendo. You're doing all of that." And I know I'm not. I know over he had time in the from New Year's until he pled guilty, and he surprisingly pled guilty, and no one's ever known why. I've always known why. The prison guard out there knows why, and the killer knows why. He did not want to face me. I was going to destroy him in court, and it would have been big. I would have shown up, you know, as my fabulous self with police badge in my background and an assault by him in my background. I would have buried him. I think he just thought I'll plead out and I'm not going to get beaten. So it sounds a lot like I'm humble bragging and all that stuff, and I totally get it. But this happened to me. It happened, and it happened to me, and I'm largely still very alone. I'm friendly and I have friends and acquaintances and stuff like that. But there's a gawk factor with me. People want to be my friends so they can find out the story. And I think we're friends. And then once they get the whole story after our first meeting, I never hear from them again. I don't know how many people I've, asked to be my, uh, you know, what do you call that? Executor of my will. Because I thought they were my friends. They turned out they all just wanted the
Yeah.
story and they were gone.
How has something like that affected your ability to be relational with people, to be in community with people, or to even pursue romantic relationships with people?
Well, I'm a performer, right? So I founded a Halloween party, and I'm the king of pride every year, and I go out and I can do stuff that's a job like that, but it's really affected me on the the great thing is the year I had to be quiet when the police had me gagged and they needed me to stay quiet was the worst year of my life. And Maya Angelou says it. There's no pain greater than having something inside you want to say and can't. So when a journalist finally did a story on me here, um, it told everybody what they were dealing with. So I didn't have to walk into a room and say, "Can I talk to you and tell you something?" They all know now. So it's a load off my mind. Um, I don't have to. People can Google me, and if people are going to someone's house for any reason, even to buy a chair, Google that person before you go. And one of the first things I did when I was that year of 2018 is I went on every sex app there was, pardon me, for gay men, and I made out profiles in which I used my many face photos. I put my Instagram, my Twitter, my Facebook, anything that could identify me. And I wanted to model behavior that if you don't know who you're hooking up with off the internet, do not go. And if you're going to someone's house, text a friend. This is a picture of the guy I'm going to see. Here's his phone number and address. I, you know, I know that I've always been an activist. I've always been someone who's really led the way, and I still find it surprising that I'm just a guy in an apartment, but many times choices I make have a lot of impact. I'm ambivalent about that responsibility, and a lot of times I play with it. Like I'll give you information. We have this thing, but tomorrow morning someone might cut it up, or like when you air it, or think they hear something that I didn't say, and I have to just keep telling myself I'm not in that. I'm not in that. I was when Freddie Mercury was dying, I was hired to be a nurse for him, and I mistook him for being my friend halfway through it, and was really not an effective healthcare worker. And somebody wrote a book about him, and then they quoted me in the book, and they said things, and they made it sound as if I said it yesterday, and it was said like just before he died, like 1992, when I was a nut and I was drinking, and it was a mess. And I remember calling somebody up and saying how embarrassed I was, and what do I do? What do I do? I'm panicking. And she said, "You want to put yourself in every living room and every armchair? You can, but that book is between that reader and their God and themselves. When somebody writes a book and they say something about you, it's between them, their computer, and their God. And you cannot put yourself in that. You are not in it." And so I realize now that I have a responsibility when I meet people to be honest and to be authentic, to listen when they're not there for the right reasons, not to be needy, not to be fearful. I have a lot of fears. I'm afraid of the dark. I go to bed about 7 o'clock, 8 o'clock every night, and I have for years. That keeps me out of a lot of trouble. And I love mornings. I love getting up at 4 in the morning. If somebody's up at 4 in the morning, I already know they're a bad guy, or me, right? So,
That's a great way to look at it.
yeah, yeah. I love being on the balcony. There's a lot of crack addicts in downtown Toronto, and I can hear them. And I want to just, I'm like Dracula. Shout out to Shauna Stoker. She's the reason I'm here. She's the reason I got connected with you. I love her. But Dracula's got a line where he hears the wolves howling and he's like, ah, the creatures of the night, what beautiful music they make. I hear the crackheads at 4 in the morning and the party's over and they're desperate. And I just think, I can relate, guys. I've been that lost. I have been that lost where I didn't exist until you walked in the room. And that's my job, is that I exist when I turn this phone off, just as much as I'm existing with you on it. And my tribe is really sick. And I travel and I'll go on the gay apps when I travel. And Americans, there's my face, here's my job, here's my business. Like, I really salute Americans for their ability to just flop the cards on the table. You come to Toronto and there are blank profiles and people will lie because they want to throw people off, and you find out what the lie is after, and then you think, well, that didn't affect the deal. That was a stupid lie. And I'm not criticizing my community. I'm just acknowledging we are still really, really bruised and battered, and we are unsafe in this city. I need therapy. I need to continue with Tamara Roberts. I would love that. And I tried to make a, what do you call that? Where they give you money, like pay my way or whatever it's called. Do you know what I'm talking about?
I don't.
GoFundMe.
I'm wondering.
GoFund. I tried
GoFundMe.
to
Okay.
I tried to make a GoFundMe for my therapy. And the weekend I put that up was the weekend that they aired a special half-hour special on my story. And I thought, good, I'll get some money out of this. And which is it sounds a lot like what a prostitute in a murder case would say, right? So that didn't do me any favors. And also that weekend, a really good-looking gay porn star in Chicago, his house burned down. He put a GoFundMe up and got like 70,000 US dollars. And then they found out he said it himself. And because it was all gay guys that sent the money, they're like, oh, just let him keep it. So I know that I'm a heavy hour on this show. I'm a heavy friend. I'm heavy. When I'm on, I'm right on. When I'm way off, I am way off. You know, I lied to somebody this week, and it was just I don't even know why I did it, and it hurt him, and it caused him a huge amount of embarrassment, and I had to backpedal and eat it and say, look, I'm broken and bent. You know, I care about you. This action doesn't reflect it. I I eat humble pie all the time. People look at me here, especially TikTokers, and they're really aggressive, right? Like telling these stories, making it murder entertainment. And I'll, they look at me and think, well, it's a white old guy. They don't see that I have differences that, you know, that make me special. Every person's special, like heaven help somebody out there that isn't diverse and gets into trouble. We all need help at sometimes because every one of us has a sack of rocks. A pimple to a beauty queen is a big deal.
Yeah.
I'm really not to judge anybody.
How would you guys like to help us get mental health resources into schools, conventions, and other events? Well, now you can. Simply go to patreon.com/victims and villains for as little as $1 a month. You guys can help us get mental health resources into current and upcoming generations, educate and break down stigma surrounding mental health, suicide, and depression. And you get exclusive content that you can't get anywhere else. And you guys can tell us which Nicolas Cage movie you want us to cover, and we'll do it. All it takes to get started is to go to patreon.com/victims and villains, or simply click the link in the episode description wherever you guys are currently listening or streaming this episode. Pick your tier and get started today. Yes, it's that simple. So quickly select the tier that you want and help us get hope into the hands of the depressed and the suicidal today. Well, I think one of the things that I really admire about you is the ability that you have to also, obviously you've had many years to process a lot of these what has happened to you and kind of choose your words wisely and formats it and gone on, your own mental health journey. Um, but the ability to just even like share what has gone on to despite the opposition that has been going on and still is going on to you today, is really commendable.
Hmm. It's heavy. I called a friend today when the attacker from 2016 was assaulting me today. And I had to call her, and I know she's tired. She's a friend in the building, right? And the guy lives in the building. And I just try and tell people where I am. And I just, my acting and modeling career probably was winding down anyways. Although with my beard, I look fabulous. and and there's like a whole new market. And the press around me was so bad. I could hear Joan Rivers sitting on one shoulder and Jane Mansfield sitting on the other. And I could just hear Joan Rivers laughing, saying, "You're getting worse press than Canada's serial killer," you know, and it's true. And I could hear Jane Mansfield on the other shoulder saying, "Go for it. Like, if that's the improv, don't say no." So my friend, he's sort of a very handsome Santa type, and he's got a really good career chiseled out of that. And we're virtually interchangeable, he and I. And I thought, I've got all this negative press around me. I've got all this sexual content around me because the all 8 of the deceased were sexualized heavily, and me 5 times, 15 times more. So I thought, well, why there's a naughty list in the Santa story. Why don't I be the naughty list Santa? And I went around just scooping up all the naughty list jobs. And every year I can tell you who's going to book me in the month of December around town because they want the naughty Santa back. So we can bounce if we don't take ourselves too seriously. Um, and there are people out there right now who are probably listening and feel alone, that they don't have a voice, that they're defeated, that it just hurts too much and they want out. I'm begging anybody that can hear us, be here tomorrow. Don't stop. Keep going. We must keep going. If anyone's feeling suicidal, or they're going to take their life, or they're just living at the world and hoping the world shoots them in the face, talk to somebody. I invite people to talk to me, but there's a me in every town, in every part of Canada and the US. There are people that care. They just don't often look like how we want them to look in our brain. But yeah.
And I feel like hearing that coming from someone that has gone through what you've gone through matters a whole lot more because you're living proof that we can face literally anything. Life sucks and life is going to give us constant like abuses and just terrible circumstances sometimes, but it is worth it to get up every day and stay with us, stay for the people that care about you, stay for the people that matter in your life and that you matter to them.
And stay for yourself. Fuck everyone. Stay for yourself. And Oscar Wilde came out of prison in the 1800s, and it was a humiliating experience for him. And they said, "Did it break your heart?" The media. And he said, "No, it turned it to stone." And when I heard that quote, I almost started to cry because I do not want that to be me. I've been through some stuff. I've been through some horrendous stuff, and I put myself through horrendous stuff even now. But I don't want that to make me hard. The I'm I what happened to me at times felt like a breakdown. And when I sit here and talk about it with you in these terms in my higher self, a breakdown becomes a breakthrough. And
Yes, it does.
Oprah says it all the time. The truth will set you free. If there's something you're afraid people will know about, just make that the first thing you say. And then for the rest of the conversation, you can relax. Um, and I always say everybody was bullied at some point in their life. Every person listening to this is listening to this for a reason, but especially with the audience you've got. Every person was bullied, and what they did to you was mean. But what we do to ourselves after is vicious. And I'm begging anybody that can hear me, stop that second part. We can't fix the bullies, but stop putting yourself through more, or they win again.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And so much like every other episode that we've ever done, if you or someone you know is listening to this, please
Yeah.
consider the mental health resource library in the show notes below. Um, Mark, where can people follow you online? You've mentioned TikTok a bunch of times, so give us the socials.
TikTok and Twitter, I'm Mark the Model. Got to be over 18 for the Twitter. TikTok is just fun. I'm really doing a deep dive with Shauna Stoker on this whole Dracula thing because I'm recreating all the costumes from the Gary Oldman Dracula. Sewing's very good for my mental health. Facebook, Mark Henderson, actor model, and Instagram, Mark Henderson, actor model. And the other thing is they don't actually have to take a journey into me. Maybe the person that is just listening to this is all they needed, and they're going to go forward and save themselves. If people that are, and you're one, Sean is one, I'm one. We're talented. Talent is dangerous. Your audience is talented. And we all have to appreciate talent is dangerous because it isolates.
It does.
There's times I'd rather be real than perfect. Those are the only two choices I have. Dumbledore, what's the Dumbledore line? We all have a choice between what is right and what is easy. And I choose to do what's right. I have a lot of anger in me when it comes to the cops, but some part of me also likes playing with them, like because they are such a dead mouse that they bring out that alley cat in me. I should probably lay off some of that, but there's no constructive place for me to put that anymore. So I'll just make my simple voice out here in the dark heard, knowing that young people out there, they'll gather up the shreds of my life and carry it like a banner on to whatever statue they're pulling down tomorrow or whatever word we're no longer allowed to use. Yeah. I know that I don't have to clean it all up. I know there's people out there that are going to make changes in our world. They're coming. We don't know who they are yet, but they will. And, every day I wake up and I carry on and I'm fabulous with how I carry on. That's a good win in this case. My heart goes out to the 8 men whose families are out there and they're confused. At least two of the families are more Canadian. The rest of the families are foreign, and all they know is that their son, their brother, their uncle, their dad went to Toronto, and for some reason they were involved in sex murders, according to Toronto police. When the verdict came in and the guy's in jail, chief of police comes out and says, "These were sex murders." I fell on the floor and I sobbed. I sobbed. They weren't sex murders. They were murders. I wasn't gay bashed. I was bashed. Like, I don't want to go around telling the world how to talk and think, but Jesus, you would think the police would have a brain. It's you can't save your face and your ass at the same time, my grandfather used to say. So I just go with that. Just saving my ass.
One day at a time.
One day at a time.
You
Yeah.
guys can Mark, thank you so much for sharing your story. You guys make sure that you guys click the links in the show notes below to check out where you guys can follow Mark on all the socials. And if once again, if you or someone you know is struggling with suicide, addiction, self-harm, or depression, please reach out. Check out our mental health resource library. The show notes are in the links below, along with all of our social medias as well, and wherever you guys get your podcasts from. I know this was a little bit diff. Go
Can I
ahead.
sign off with a quote?
Go for it.
Okay, I'm going to leave your listeners with this, and then I won't say another word so you can close your show.
Sure.
But
It's all good.
I had to testify on behalf of myself and the police to seal the media from going after me. And I just copied this one quote from Judi Dench in Skyfall, which is actually Tennyson. And here it is. Though much is given, much abides. And though we are not now that strength which in old days moved earth and heaven, that which we are, we are. One of equal temper, of heroic hearts, made weak by time and fate, but strong in will to survive, to seek, to find, and not to yield. Thank you so much for having me as a guest on your show.
Thank you so much for sharing your story. Stories like this matter, and this is how we deconstruct the stigma surrounding mental health. Have a good night.